There is this story running underneath your life right now, not the one you tell people, not the official narrative about where you're headed and what you're building and who you're becoming, the other one. The one that runs quietly underneath every decision, every hesitation, every time you almost move and then don't. The one that sounds like people like me don't get to have that. Or the last time I tried something like this, it all fell apart. Or I should be further along by now. Or who am I to think I can build something real when I can barely hold myself together? Or the quietest and most dangerous one of all, maybe this is just who I am. That story is not the truth. It is a conclusion drawn from incomplete evidence by a younger version of you who was doing the best they could with what they had at the time. And it has been running the show ever since. Obviously, not loudly, not obnoxiously, not obviously, but persistently, shaping what you reach for, what you avoid, and how much you allow yourself to want, how quickly you retreat when the wanting starts to feel dangerous. And the fear is not the enemy. The story about the fear, that's the enemy. And this episode is about finding it, naming it, and deciding, finally, clearly today, that it does not get to stay in charge. Welcome back to the Listen Bitch podcast. This is the rebellion season, and I believe episode 9. I am Brandon Lynette. We have covered serious ground in this brand new season. Thank you to the world stepping out from behind the curtain and all of the evil and all of the truth of what everyone's after, for us to see, like we have to start a rebellion to save ourselves because no one is coming. But we're here. Truth is a daily practice. Your body, your money, your relationships, spiritual warfare, parenting, your legacy, discipline, consistency, identity, and calling. This episode lies somewhere in the middle of all of that, and it ties something really specific into every episode, really. The fear underneath them. Underneath every topic, every single topic we've hit this season has fear living in its basement. And if we don't name it directly, it just keeps operating in the shadows. And when we're called to be the light, we don't get to let parts of us live in the shadow. This episode does have a little twist because the particular flavor of fear I want to talk about today is not the loud kind, not like the fear of falling off a cliff, right? It's the fear of stopping, the fear of slowing down, the fear of the quiet, the fear of not producing, not performing, not moving, and what that reveals about the stories you've been running from by staying perpetually busy. And this one is going to probably make my high achievers a little uncomfortable for the people who are currently white knuckling through a season that is asking them to slow down and they absolutely will not. For the people in a transitional season who don't know what comes next and are terrified of the space between. And for the neurodivergent brains in the room who experience stillness not as rest, but to us it is a threat. Listen Bitch podcast is still looking for sponsors. Aligned brands only, health, sovereignty, truth, integrity. Reach out Brandon to at brandonlynette.com. Make sure you guys get resourced with the links in my show notes. I do share a number one product in my life right now that would benefit everyone because 97% of you guys are imbalanced here. And so I take a daily shot. One shot a day keeps the doctor away, and that is part of our rebellion. We are not resourcing our health out to other people. We're taking massive responsibility. So get in touch with the shot that I'm taking, and it's not the one you think, okay? Every fear has an origin story, okay? It did not arrive from nowhere. It was written in a specific moment or even a series of moments when something happened that your brain decided was evidence of a permanent truth about you, about life, about what is and isn't available to people like you. Maybe the story was written in a failure that got treated as a verdict, not just something that didn't work, but something that was used by someone else or by you to draw a conclusion about your fundamental capacity. You tried it, failed, and somewhere in the aftermath, you know, the lesson was absorbed to not try differently next time. It was you are someone things don't work out for. It just doesn't work out for you. And that conclusion just filed away as fact and it's been quietly informing you what you reach for ever since. And maybe the story was written in a success that was punished. You excelled at something, and the people around you responded with jealousy or criticism with the particular social tax that gets levied on people who stand out too long from the group average. And you learned, not consciously, but completely, that being too visible, too successful, too far ahead was dangerous. That safety lives somewhere in the middle. That staying average was a social contract, and you've been honoring that contract at the expense of your calling every day since. Maybe the story was written in the home you grew up in the atmosphere around money, around ambition, around what was possible for your family, your community, your people, in the collective agreement, spoken or unspoken, about the ceiling. And you absorbed that ceiling as a structural reality rather than what it actually was, which is the inherited fear of people who had been burned before you. And these stories stuck because they were written in high stakes moments when your nervous system was fully activated and looking for an explanation. And the explanation your brain landed on in that moment with the information that the development stage got filed as truth. Not hypothesis, not one interpretation amongst several possible ones. The truth. And truth does not get questioned, right? It just operates. And the work of this episode for you guys today is questioning it. Not because of your experiences that they weren't real, because they were real, but the conclusions that you drew from them. They may have been the most available explanation in that moment rather than the most accurate one. And you're not required to keep living inside an explanation that was written by a younger, more afraid, less resourced version of yourself. We have productivity guilt, right? We go somewhere most people are not expecting in an episode about fear and mindset, because the most common fear running in high achievers is not the fear of failure or the fear of success or even the fear of being too much. It is the fear of stopping. Productivity guilt is the low grade constant anxiety that arrives the moment you're not producing something. The moment you sit down without a purpose, the moment the to-do list is done, and instead of feeling relief, you feel off, like you're missing something, failing at something, falling behind some invisible standard that requires you to always be in motion. It is the inability to just be without the feeling that it's just a waste. And it's performative, right? It's you're going to be wearing a virtue costume. And that's why it's so hard to identify and interrupt, because it looks like work ethic. It looks like ambition. It looks like responsibility. It looks like being someone who takes their life seriously. But underneath the costume is something much less flattering. The belief that your worth is conditioned on your output, that you are only acceptable to God, to yourself, to the people around you when you are producing something. That rest is something you earn rather than something you require. And that stillness is laziness. That being less is less valuable than doing. And where did that belief come from? For most of us, it comes from an environment where love and performance were linked, where approval was contingent on achievement, where the way you earned your place in the family, the community, the faith system was by being useful. And the child who learned that love was conditional on output, because the adult who cannot stop producing, because stopping feels like losing the thing they have been performing for, even when the audience is long gone, even when nobody's keeping score anymore. The internal scorekeeper took over and has been running the performance evaluations ever since. You were not put on this earth to produce. You were put here to live fully, presently, in relationship with God and with the people in your life. And production is meant to be the overflow of that life, not the substitute for it. When you are running on productivity to avoid the quiet, you're not living, you're performing. And the performance will eventually demand a price. Your body, your brain, and your soul are not going to be able to keep paying. And I want to clear the idea of what rest is versus like what you think it is, okay? Because a lot of people are doing something they call rest, and that is not actually rest. And then like they wonder why they're still exhausted. Scrolling on your phone is not rest. It's a different form of input, one that requires less active processing than work, but still keeps your nervous system stimulated, your attention fragmented, and your brain cycling through comparison, reaction, and low-grade anxiety on a loop. The average person spends hours doing this every day and calls it downtime. And then they cannot understand why they feel simultaneously overstimulated and understimulated, tired, but unable to slow down. Distraction is not rest. And this distraction with you guys has been intentional. Intentional programming on your phone, you're falling for it. Binge watching, overconsumption, the constant low hum of noise and content and input that it fills every silence before silence can even mean anything. This is avoidance. It keeps you from the quiet where the real things live, which is often the point. That's what you're avoiding. If you stay distracted enough, you never have to sit with the discomfort, the uncertainty, the voice that has been trying to get your attention through the static for longer than you've been willing to acknowledge. Busy rest is not rest. The vacation that is scheduled to within an inch of its life, the weekend that is optimized for productivity, the day off that gets filled with productive leisure, the kind that you can report on that generates something that has an output. This is rest as a performance. You're putting on a show. Rest that still has to justify itself. Rest that hasn't actually given the nervous system permission to stop. Real rest is the kind that your body, your brain, and your spirit require to regenerate. Not just recover from the last push, but actually rebuild it. It involves genuine stillness. Not comfortable stillness necessarily. For a lot of wiring configurations, stillness is profoundly uncomfortable at first. Because the moment the noise stops, the things you've been running from get really loud. But through that discomfort is where the actual restoration happens, where your nervous system finally downregulates, where your brain consolidates, creates, and reconnects to itself, where your spirit has space to surface what it's been trying to tell you under all the productivity. Real rest looks different for different people. For some, it is physical stillness. For others, it is movement that doesn't produce anything, like go for a walk or a swim or a run that has no goal beyond moving. For some people, it's creativity without output. Make something with no intention of showing it to anyone. For neurodivergent brains especially, rest is often an activity that allows the executive function to completely disengage while the body is occupied. The shower, the drive, the walk, the doing of the simple physical thing that doesn't require the front of the brain to manage anything and everything. The kind of activity where the best ideas come, okay? That's when the clarity arrives. That's where the thing you've been trying to force in your working hours actually shows up effortlessly in your resting ones. And the common thread in all of this is permission, because real rest requires that you actually give yourself permission to stop without it meaning something about your worth. And for people whose worth has been tied to their output their whole lives, that permission is one of the hardest things that you can ever, ever, ever give yourself. And there is spiritual discipline in stillness. And I want to stay here for a minute because this is the part the busyness covers most effectively. And if you're watching this video, yes, my headphone is messing with one of my piercings and it's really annoying. I keep adjusting. It's taking my attention. I just want to say that, God really speaks in the quiet. This is what I've known to be true. Not exclusively, like he's not limited to silence. And some of the clearest direction people receive comes in the middle of full speed motion, right? But the still small voice that like Elijah heard after the wind and the earthquake and the fire, that's not a metaphor. It is a description of how the deepest and most orienting communication between a person and God tends to happen. And it's not in the noise, in what comes after the noise, in the space that only exists when you have stopped filling every silence with something. And the person who cannot be still is the person who cannot hear. And it's not because God stops speaking, but because the static is so loud. And for people who are running from something, from the uncertainty of a transitional season, from the fear of what the quiet reveals, or from the grief of the confusion or the honest reckoning that stillness would require. Busyness is not just a productivity problem, it's a spiritual one. It is the active avoidance of the conversation that would change virtually everything. Elijah ran from the thing that was asked of him until his body gave out, and God did not come to him in the spectacular. Not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire. He came in the still, small voice. After everything else had exhausted itself, when Elijah had nothing left to perform, nowhere left to run, nothing left to do but sit in the cave and be honest about how done he was. And in that moment of total depletion and complete honesty, that is where the direction came. That is where the next assignment was given, not in the peak performance, in the cave. And listen, bitch, you might be in the cave right now. You might be in the season that doesn't make sense, that isn't producing the results you expected, that feels like regression or failure being lost. And the temptation is to run harder, to manufacture momentum, to force the next thing, to stay busy enough that the fear of the in-between doesn't catch you. And I want to ask you to consider that the cave is not punishment. The cave is preparation. And the still small voice that is waiting for you there has something to say that you cannot hear from the space you're currently running. Stopping is not falling behind. Sometimes stopping is the most obedient thing you can do. And I want to talk about the transitional season when you just don't know what's coming next. And this is for you listening, the one who is in the in between, the season that does not have a name yet, where something is ended or is ending, and what comes next just hasn't revealed itself clearly enough to move toward. The job, maybe the relationship, the chapter, the identity, gone or going, and the next thing not yet visible. And the fear in that space, the specific, particular, almost unbearable fear of the in between, is one of the most disorienting experiences a human being can have, because we are meaning making creatures. We need the narrative. We need to know the next part of the story. And when the next part of the story is, genuinely unknown, not just like unclear, but actually unwritten, the nervous system experiences that as a threat. The brain goes searching for certainty and finds none, and then it escalates. And the temperature is to manufacture certainty, to force the next chapter to start before it's ready, to make a decision, any decision, just to end the intolerable suspension of not knowing. And some of the worst decisions that people make happen in the transitional seasons. And it's not because they're reckless or stupid, but because the anxiety of the in-between finally gets heavy enough that movement in any direction feels better than the stillness of not knowing. And so they take the wrong job to end the uncertainty of being unemployed. They rush into the wrong relationship to end the loneliness of the in-between. They launch the next thing before they finish processing the last one, and they pay for the forced certainty with months or years spent in a chapter that was chosen from panic rather than from clarity. When the transitional season is actually asking of you is the hardest thing, is just to stay in the not knowing long enough for the knowing to actually arrive, to resist the manufactured certainty, to be in the cave without forcing the exit, and to trust that the in-between has a function, that something is being processed. You're refining fire, you're being integrated, clarified, healed, prepared. That cannot happen at the pace you want to move through it. And that next thing, when it comes, will be clearer and more aligned and more genuinely yours than anything you could have forced from the panic in the middle. This requires a specific kind of faith, and not the faith that knows what comes next, but the faith that trusts the one who does, that says, I cannot see the next step and I'm going to stay here anyway in the discomfort of the unknown because I trust that you are working in the silence and the stillness, and the season doesn't make sense yet. That's not passive faith. That is some of the most active, courageous, muscular faith available. And, some of when I say white knuckling, when your season is asking you to stop and you won't, you know what I'm talking about. Like, your body is telling you, your energy is telling you, the results are telling you, or the lack of them is. The season is clearly, unmistakably asking you to slow down, to pause, to rest, to stop forcing shit. You are gripping harder, white knuckling through interpreting the resistance as something to overcome rather than something to listen to. Calling the exhaustion laziness, calling depletion a mindset problem, calling the season that is asking you to be still a spiritual attack instead of a divine invitation. Here's a question worth sitting with. What are you afraid would happen if you stopped? And I don't want the practical answer, not the bills or the deadlines or the responsibilities. Underneath that bullshit, what is the actual fear? That, well, you're going to fall apart? That the people around you would discover you're not as together as you appear? That God would find you lacking? That the momentum would never come back? That if you stop even for a season, you will have confirmed something you've been afraid of was true about yourself all along? Because the white knuckling is never really about the pace. It's about the fear underneath the pace. And the pace is the way you manage that fear by staying too busy to feel it, too productive to hear it, too in motion for it to catch you. And that works in the short term, sure. It costs you. It costs you your health. It costs your relationships, your creativity, your clarity, your ability to hear the still small voice in the long term. The season that is asking you to slow down is not your enemy. That depletion is not failure. Your body is not betraying you. Your circumstances are not conspiring against you. Something is being asked of you that requires a different posture than the one you're in. And the invitation, however inconvenient, however terrifying, however much it goes against every instinct you have, is to stop fighting the season and start listening to it. Brandon, this is the part of the show where you're going to help us and tell us what to do. I mean, find the story. Write down the single most limiting belief you carry about yourself. The one that's been living underneath the busyness. The one that the productivity is quietly running from. Finish the sentence without editing it. The reason I can't have the thing I actually want is what? Fill in the blank. Whatever comes up. Just look at it. Ask where it came from. Ask whether it is actually true or whether it is a conclusion drawn by a younger, more afraid version of you from evidence that was never as conclusive as it felt. You're not required to keep believing it, but you do have to find it, name it, define it before you can choose differently. I want you to do this for me. Not for me, but it's for you. But I'm saying it. So is it for me? No, it's for you. If you can't do it for yourself, then do it for me. Schedule 20 minutes of genuine stillness this week. Not productive rest, not where you're scrolling on your phone, not a podcast in the background. I'm just saying 20 minutes of actual quiet. Outside if you can, no device, nothing required of you, nothing. And when the discomfort comes, and it will come, I want you not to escape it. Like, just stay in it and ask God what he's been trying to say in the space you haven't been giving him, and then stay long enough to actually hear him talk to you. And third, if you are in a transitional season, I want you to write down the one decision you have been about to make from panic, the forced certainty, the thing you're considering doing just to end the intolerable suspension of not knowing. And then don't make that decision this week. Give yourself one more week of the in-between. Not forever, bitch. I'm just saying 1 week. And I want you to use that week to practice staying in the not knowing without manufacturing an exit. Because the thing that is trying to emerge in your transitional season deserves more than a rushed birth from an anxious parent, okay? The quiet is not empty. It is where everything real lives. And this episode, really honestly, this is what I needed to hear during the seasons I white knuckled through. I didn't have a rebellion season podcast to listen to get me through this. The invitation was to stop. The one I needed when I was manufacturing certainty from panic. The one I needed when I was too busy to hear what God was actually saying. Made the show for you. And if this episode found you in a season that doesn't make sense yet, if you recognize the productivity guilt, the white knuckling, the fear underneath the busyness, please hear this. The season you are in is not a mistake. It is not failure. It is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is the cave. And the still small voice is there. You just have to get quiet enough, long enough to hear it. Please like the show, subscribe, leave a written review, 2 minutes, real impact. Someone else is in their cave right now wondering if they're the only one, and your review is going to be the only way they can find out they're not. Okay. Head to brandonlynette.com and get plugged in to everything this season. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Watch the full video versions. The quiet is not your enemy. The stillness is not falling behind. And what comes after the cave, after the honest, uncomfortable, productive stillness is always worth what the waiting costs.